Och då har tiden kommit att välkomna in, om inte på scenen så i alla fall på Zoom, Abliva. And we will now switch over to English and say welcome to the CEO of Abliva, Ellen Donnelly. So please, Ellen, tell us more about you.
Hi, thanks for the invitation to speak today. I'm excited to be here with this group of driven entrepreneurial women. I must say, when I left Big Pharma and took my first CEO position, I remember it was a very lonely time as I had not had the opportunity to develop a network of similarly minded and focused individuals, neither male nor female, who understood the highs and lows of being a CEO, but were also able to offer support and suggestions when things got difficult. And so I miss being there with you. I'm sorry I'm on Zoom, but I think that events like this are just a fantastic way to build the network. So I hope that everybody in the room is able to do that today. Include me in your network, please, because of the COVID restrictions. Obviously, I can't get there, but I'm excited to have this opportunity to present the company to you. As a bit of an introduction, I have my training in drug development from Pfizer, where I worked for almost a decade in a variety of different leadership roles, everything from corporate consulting to neuroscience research, project management, and then when I left, I was doing clinical operations. When my family moved to Sweden in 2016, I left Pfizer and I joined a small biotech company at that time focused on rare disease, sickle cell disease. And I'd had an interest in rare diseases for most of my life because I grew up with a woman in my class who had a rare disease, but had no idea what it was. So her parents took her from doctor to doctor, looking for answers, but only getting more questions. And it wasn't until she actually was in college and started to do research herself. So she was a bench scientist. She was doing genetic research. She found out what she had. And I still remember that to this day because it took her initiative and her research to actually diagnose her disease. And I think that that's something that most rare disease patients have to deal with. I don't think any of us can imagine a situation where we suffer from a disease that controls your life, but affects so little people that nobody does research on it and there are no medications that work. And so that got me really interested in the rare disease space. And that's one of the things that drove me to the company I'm going to talk to you about. This is Abliva, and we're targeting the powerhouse of the cells to improve the lives of patients with primary mitochondrial diseases. So what else drove me? I told you that I was interested in rare diseases, and that's our focus. But I also saw Abliva as a company that has all the components necessary to become a leader in this space. So it is our goal to become the global leader in mitochondrial medicine. And I think we can do that because we have all of the components or the framework to do that. The first thing we have is a portfolio of first-in-class disease assets that will treat primary mitochondrial diseases. Our lead asset is about ready to start a global registrational study, and that could be on the market as soon as 2025, with peak sales of over $1 billion. Our second pipeline asset is due to enter the clinic next year. So by the middle of next year, we'll have 2 assets in the clinic focused in primary mitochondrial diseases. Our strategic focus, as I already mentioned, is rare diseases. These are important for me because of the patients and for my team. We're all focused on the patients, but it's important for investors because rare diseases have a lot of opportunities associated with them. It's easier to get to the market. You get regulatory help. Your path to market may be more fast. And there's also the opportunity to have blockbuster sales potential. Another thing I was impressed with at the team, this team has over 20 years of experience in mitochondrial medicine research. Both Magnus, our CMO, and Eskil, our CSO, have been working in this space for over 2 decades. And that's pretty remarkable because that was a time at which we didn't even think about the mitochondria as being a therapeutic target. We just opened a Boston office, so we're now located both in Lund, Sweden, and I'm based in Boston in the US. One other thing that differentiates us is our ability to work in both research and development. That's fairly unique for a biotech of our size. We're 10 people strong, but we work across both of those areas. And that's super important because we have the research group that can do studies to support our clinical stage assets. They can also do one other thing. They can find new programs for us. So Eskil's team is focused on working with some of our collaborators in chemistry to design new molecules that we can move forward into the clinic. That's pretty unique. We're publicly traded on NASDAQ Sweden, and we have about a $30 million market cap. So you may ask me, I'm going to focus on PMDs today. What are these? So in short, these are devastating rare diseases. These patients have very severe symptoms and they have continuous deterioration throughout their life. They have multi-systemic complications. So when I say that, we may have a patient that has impact on the heart and the brain, lungs, hearing. These are all common problems with these patients. They have a reduced quality of life, and many of them have a reduced lifespan. So in some diseases, the patients live till 5, others, they can make it till 30, and some of the lucky ones, they can live a full life, although it's at a really reduced quality. There are no approved medicines for these patients. They're given symptomatic drugs to help them. So if they have hearing loss, they may be given a hearing aid, but there's nothing that can improve their disease state. We get them because we either have mutations in our nuclear DNA or our mitochondrial DNA. Either of those mutations, what they do is they affect the mitochondrial function. So you have mitochondria in every cell in your body, and they're responsible for generating energy, or ATP. And those mitochondria, when they don't work, your cells can't do what they need to do on a daily basis. And that leads to really huge complications for the patient. What's happening here? I'm not going to get too scientific, but what we believe is happening is that there's an imbalance in NAD plus and NADH in the system. And we believe that that's the cause of the disease. So what does my drug do? KL1333 has a unique mechanism of action. We're the only person with a drug focused on this area. And what we do is we correct that imbalance in NAD plus NADH. We bring it back to normal so those mitochondria can start functioning again. That's important for 2 reasons. The first is that we expect this drug to have symptomatic effects. So we expect it to make the patient feel better because those cells are able to actually work just a little bit better. We also expect that it'll have disease modifying effects. So that means that the disease course may change. It may slow down. The patients deteriorate a bit more slowly because we're creating more mitochondria in their body. So they have more chances to get enough energy in that cell. So that's important. So the thing I think I'm most proud at, and I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about, is our focus on the patients. So I told you I entered rare disease because I was focused on the patients. And this company is really focused on the patients as well. Patients sit at the core of everything we do. So when Abliva started working in this space, it was really important for us to understand what the patients felt. So I find any company that doesn't go talk to the patients, you're missing something, right? Because we're here for the patients. So we went and talked to the patients. We collaborated with patient organizations. We attended and worked with the FDA and their Voice of the Patient meeting. And we talked to those patients and we said, what bothers you the most about your disease? And we found that they were all bothered by fatigue. This isn't fatigue like we feel if we're up too late at night. This is debilitating fatigue. This means I can't get out of bed in the morning. This means I can't go to the grocery store because I know it'll just make me too tired. This may mean I have to take a shower at night instead of the morning, because if I take it in the morning before I go to work, I won't make it to work. And I can only work short days anyway, because I don't have the energy to make it through a full day. So we really heard that loud and clear from the patients with this disease. So then we had to say, okay, we're interested in fatigue, but is this something we can actually study? Is it frequent? What does it manifest with? Can we do that? So we did a patient registry study, and this was run in the UK with a mito cohort. And we learned a lot about that would help inform our study. Then we had to figure out how to study and measure fatigue. Because as you can imagine, the way I describe my fatigue may be very different than the way you describe it. And that's a problem when we're doing clinical research. So we went to the FDA and we talked to them about it, because the regulators are here and they're our friends. And especially when we're developing drugs for rare diseases, they help us. And we went to the FDA and we said, we want to measure fatigue. What do you think? They said, that's great, because that's really what impacts the patients. And we said, okay, how can we do it? So what we agreed on was validating a fatigue survey that's specific for PMD patients, because many of the surveys that are out there are a bit too general and don't actually address the problems that we see in PMD patients. So an example is one question asks about their ability to do strenuous exercise. As a PMD patient, you don't do strenuous exercise. So if I asked you that question in a clinical trial, you would laugh at me, and then you would say never, and that wouldn't change. So we want to get rid of questions that just aren't relevant to the patients. So we did do a validation study. We met with patients, learned about their disease, and validated an endpoint, which will be the first PMD-specific endpoint in the industry, which we hope will make us more successful in our clinical study. So after we did that, we talked to regulators, we talked to patients, we talked to physicians. we wanted to talk to the payers because we wanted to make sure that the payers would pay for this drug. So there's nothing like getting a drug approved and then finding out that no one's going to reimburse it. So we went into the payer research and talked to the patients about, or the payers about fatigue, the clinical study, and other aspects of the study. And they were supportive of that as well. So that was all fun. That kind of validated what we were doing. We said, okay, this endpoint looks like it can work on fatigue. And then we went and talked to the relevant shareholders to validate that idea. But the next thing we needed was data, right? So I need to show you, as somebody that's interested in this company, that we can actually change the fatigue in these patients. So what I'm going to show you on this next slide is some data that we just got out of our phase 1B cohort of patients. And this was 8 PMD patients. They had any form of PMD. They came into the study site and they got our drug KO-1333 for 10 days at a very low dose. And we said in that period, we asked them about their fatigue. And so here on the left, you can see 2 fatigue scales. One of them is called the NeuroQol scale. The other one's called the daily fatigue scale. Both of these scales ask the patient questions about their fatigue. NeuroQol does it over the past 7 days, and daily fatigue asks in the past 24 hours, how often have you had an issue with strenuous exercise? And here you can see the data. We dosed 8 patients, either with KO-1333 or placebo. And you can see the difference in the cohorts. So these are the placebo patients. They got worse. Their fatigue worsened over the 10 days that we ran the study. And the KO-1333 patients got better. We saw a similar response in the daily fatigue scale. Now you may look at that and you say, oh, well, the bars are different, but does that matter? Yeah, it does. So we went to the literature and we said, okay, what is clinically meaningful in these patients? And we couldn't look at PMD patients because nobody's looked at this before. So we looked at other relevant patient populations, and it does look like this is clinically relevant. If the patients took KO-1333, they will feel a difference if they saw this magnitude of change. So that was important. And that really told us that, yes, we should go study fatigue. So it was nice that all of the work that we had done previously was reinforced by this data. You can see here on the right, something else that was interesting that came out of the study. Here you can see, if you look at this black bar here, you can see that the patients that had more drug in their system, so these patients all had over 4,500 in their system, they did better on the test than the patients who had less drug in their system. So we call this an exposure efficacy correlation. So patients with more drug do better. Patients with less drug in their system do worse. Patients with no drug in their system did even worse. And that was actually a statistically significant difference. That was important to us because we saw that if we could get the dose high enough in these patients, then it's likely to be effective in everyone. So in this study that we're about to run, we'll double the dose, and patients will be dosed up to 100 milligrams per day twice a day. So they'll take 50 milligrams in the morning and 50 milligrams in the afternoon. Now that was really neat data. But we'd also looked at one more clinical endpoint. And this was fun because this is an area that we kind of looked at just to see if the drug might impact. So this test is called the 30-second sit to stand. So in this test, the patient keeps their hands crossed and stands up and sits down as many times as they can within 30 seconds. So a super easy test. We're just standing up and sitting down as many times. And here again, we saw a difference in the placebo patients than the patients dosed with KO-1333. Again, we went back to the literature and it turns out this is clinically relevant as well. So these patients would feel an improvement in their weakness and their endurance from this study. This was interesting because, again, this wasn't an area that we particularly thought would move, but it really did. And so this allowed us to add 2 endpoints to our clinical study. So this study has been strengthened by this data because now we have a chance to be successful on fatigue, but we also have a chance to be successful on the functional endpoint, muscle weakness and endurance. So that was a fun finding out of that and really confirms, I think, our clinical design going forward. So what does that look like? The study that we're expecting to run is a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study. So what that means is that patients won't know whether they're on drug or whether they're on placebo. Either will the physicians. Nobody does. It's called a blinded study because none of us know what drug that patient is getting. The patients that we will use or enroll in the study are called primary mitochondrial disease patients with multisystemic mitochondrial DNA-related disease. We're also going to ask that they have that genetic background, but they also have a phenotypic background where they need to have fatigue. They also need to have myopathy, because you saw that those are our primary endpoints. So we want to make sure that the patient is suffering from those two conditions before we enroll them in the study. They're going to be dosed twice a day for 12 months. And the reason we're going so long is because we believe that this mitochondrial biogenesis, or the creation of more mitochondria, will take a while. And so we want to give that time to happen. We're going to have an adaptive design with an interim analysis, and we'll look at those two endpoints. So that's great. We're super excited to start that study. But as an investor, you may say, okay, that's great. You're really interested in the patients, but why should I invest in your company? What is interesting here about this? The first thing I think that's really interesting is that KL1333 has blockbuster potential. So this is a back of the envelope calculation, but you can see my assumptions on the right, and you can see the potential on the left. And that hits $1 billion in peak sales pretty easily. One of the other things that's nice about our portfolio and our company is that we have other assets in development. So while we're running KL1333, we'll have other opportunities for news flow and increase in share price. So we have that second program, NV354. This is a different mechanism of action focused in a different PMD, but in the same area. That'll start clinical study next year. And then we also have an off-strategy asset that you may have heard about before if you followed Abliva. This is called Neurostat. It's focused on traumatic brain injury. And that asset is interesting in that it has an open IND, ODD designation, fast track status. And that's something that we're looking to partner with and active in discussions with on that topic. So a number of opportunities to continue to create value across the portfolio. One of the things that I think differentiates us well, I mentioned, is our small team. We are experienced, but small and efficient, and extremely productive. And so we keep our costs low, yet we can do a lot. We're also supported by a great network of individuals, both at the board and the scientific advisory level. These guys are amazing, and they support our work almost on a weekly basis. But I said we were a small team, and I thought we were pretty productive. I think we've really delivered in the first half of the year, and I just put up some of the corporate milestones and the portfolio milestones here. But I started in February, and the team had a heck of a task in onboarding me into the company. We immediately completed a directed share issue at Target. We established a US subsidiary, and we continue to meet with investors and partners about the assets in our portfolio. KL1333 had a stellar year with a phase 1B study reporting. We had a drug-drug interaction study that we ran and reported. Patient validation study was done. We held regulatory meetings with both the FDA and the EMA. We're working on the IND, and we're getting ready to start a global study. So that's all exciting. And then NV354 continues as planned. So what am I going to do for the next 6 months? We're going to get KL1333 into the clinic. We're submitting the IND and hope to get approval. And then we'll start a global clinical study. We're also hoping that NV354 moves into the clinic early next year after we finalize the preclinical farm package. And then corporate, we're busy as well. We're continuing ongoing discussions with investors and partners to finance our study. We're establishing a lot of conversations to create value from our non-core assets. And we're continuing to build Abliva as we try to become the global leader in mitochondrial medicine. So I think I've talked too long, and I'm not going to have any time for questions and answers. So I'm going to stop there. But I hope this is giving you a picture of Abliva. We are focused on really kind of helping patients with PMD, and we're focused on becoming a leader in this space. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Please give her a hand. But we actually do have time for questions, don't we? Yeah, we do. So we don't let you go that easily, Ellen.
No, I knew you wouldn't.
That's good. Okay, so I would like to ask you, why is this a good time for you to come and introduce yourself to investors?
Well, I've kind of been talking to investors since I joined in February. I think right now is a really important time for the company because, as you can imagine, when you enter a company, nobody's very interested in investing in that new CEO who doesn't know the company. So finally, I've had time to establish myself in the company and kind of establish the trust of investors as we delivered on the expectations in the first half of the year. We're also at the point where we're starting the process to raise financing for this big global study that we're about to run. And so that's the reason we're kind of getting out today, is in order to get people excited about the company, make sure you understand our story, have the opportunity to answer any questions, and kind of build momentum as we work to raise that financing.
And that's, of course, what you are interested in. But I'm also wondering, why should these investors go into you at this very moment? Why is this a good time?
Well, I hope I told you about the excitement in the company. Also, I think that we have a pretty low value, a pretty low share price right now. So that provides an investor an opportunity to come in and see additional value generated fairly quickly. I think we have a lot of catalysts upcoming. And so that hopefully will drive the share price. So I think right now is a good time to come in, because there are a number of opportunities to see that share price increase over the next 6 months, year, 2 years.
But of course, we all know this is a risky business. And how do you work to decrease the risks and increase the probability of success?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because we've all seen failures. My last biotech company, I was the CEO of Modus Therapeutics, which is a company that's based in Stockholm. And we actually had a very successful run with investors and had potential partners on the table, and actually had a term sheet on the table when the study read out negative. To everyone's surprise. So I understand how important it is to de-risk. I think what we've done at this company is really de-risk the portfolio as much as we can. So we ran this drug-drug interaction study, and that may not mean much, but what that is that's looking at whether KL1333 interacts with commonly used medications. And we did that before the study, so we wouldn't have any surprises when we got into the study. We've also done this validation study with patients. We ran the patient cohort in the 1B to try to see if KL1333 worked in patients. So we tried to do a lot of de-risking activities in order to make this trial successful. One of the things that we did just this summer, which was new, is add that functional endpoint. And I think that that really de-risked the program, because we now have 2 shots at goal. We have 2 opportunities to have a successful study. If the study hits statistically in fatigue, and it doesn't get worse in the functional endpoint, that's a successful study. If it hits in the functional but doesn't hit in fatigue, again, that's a successful study. And then if both of them hit, obviously, the sky's the limit with the drug. But I think that has de-risked the program as well. And that's a new turn of events for the program. And we were able to do that based on the data coming out of that 1B cohort.
Okay, so some good indications here. And I would like to invite the audience to raise a question to you. Är det någon som vill ställa en fråga? Om ni vill ställa den på svenska så kan jag se om jag lyckas översätta. No questions in the audience for the moment. As I understood it, you're also in discussions with FDA for the moment. So what are they about and how is it going?
Oh, yeah, that's one of the philosophies and our strategies is to be in constant discussions with the regulators. We've spoken to the FDA multiple times, MHRA and EMA, and it just makes the program better when we talk to them. So the discussion this time was about the co-primary endpoints. What we do is we call them alternate endpoints. And so that was the latest discussion. But I can't tell you how helpful they are. I think every time we meet with them, we get insights and they give us suggestions on how to make the study better. So it's really been advantageous to have that opportunity to meet with them before you file the IND and you finalize all the documents.
Mm-hmm. Also, I'm wondering, as an investor, of course, you're wondering what is the cash situation for the moment. You said that you're going to raise funds.
Yep. Yeah. So we have cash on hand for a bit over half a year, and we are trying to raise the financing to run the clinical study. What we've communicated to the market is we're looking to raise a round of 30 to 40 million US, or about 300 to 400 million SEK.
Mm-hmm. And then how far would that take you?
That will take us to take KL1333 hopefully to the market should the study be positive. So that gives us the runway to get this drug approved.
Okay. Also, I'm wondering, maybe you mentioned it, but what is really your competition?
Yeah, I didn't mention that in this presentation. Thank you for asking. So this is an interesting space. There are 2 other companies that we call competitors, but I say that in a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek method because we could be used in addition to them. So they're basically starting the study at a similar time. They're also running a registrational study. They both have drugs that have a different mechanism of action. They are PPAR delta modulators. So we are unique from those 2 in that we have a different MOA and I think probably a more effective drug. that the clinical trial will tell us that. So those are the clear competitors. There are also a couple companies out there that are looking at drugs that actually improve the cognitive effects of the patient. So again, those could be used in combination. So it is a pretty open space, which makes it an attractive area and de-risk the program even more.
So there would be space for all of you?
There should be space for all of us. I like to use the example of multiple sclerosis. I worked in that area when there were 3 approved drugs, and everyone said, oh, you know, this area is full. There's only room for something revolutionary. And that's when Tisabri was in development and had the PML issues that kind of provided a hurdle for that compound for a bit. But that was resolved, as we all know. And that area, I think last time I checked, now has 13 approved medications. So these areas can withstand a lot of drugs. And I think the nice thing for patients is that if we can give them options, they can find the drug that's best for them. And that's really important for the patients.
That's great. We do have some audience questions. So what are the biggest risks coming up?
I think the biggest risk is the financing. The market has gotten a bit soft, as you're aware. And so we're always really focused on the financing, and that's probably the biggest risk. I think the other risk is probably delays due to COVID or other. Starting a study is never easy, and we're starting a global study that we expect to be run across the world. And so you always get delays there that you don't expect. In my last company, we actually started a study in Saudi Arabia, and I remember thinking that would be an 18-month process, and it ended up taking us about 2 years. So you never know with these things, but we're hoping to get this drug into the clinic as quickly as we can.
Mm-hmm. And you told us about what's going to be your focus for the next of the year, but someone here is looking for a little pick-me-up. Do you have some upcoming milestones this autumn that we can look forward to?
Oh, absolutely. I think the biggest milestone this fall will be the submission and the approval of the IND for KL1333. We'll also make a decision on NV354 based on the preclinical safety and pharmacology package that we're developing right now. So that'll be an important milestone. Yeah, and there are a lot of studies that are reading out right now. So just this month, we completed the fatigue validation study. We completed a long-term safety study and did a mouse study that's extremely important for us as far as dosing. So all of those will be important to the company as well.
So we should stay tuned for news from Abliva.
Absolutely. We're always happy to share news and answer questions. So we're always open. Just feel free to contact us.
Okay, so that's good words for wrapping this up and saying thank you so much, Ellen Donnelly, for being with us from Boston.
Thank you. Have a good day, guys. Enjoy the meeting.